Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I would like to welcome all of you to the second session of our Python training. My name is Nabil Awidat, a master's petroleum engineering student at the University of Boumerdès in Algeria, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So today we have, it's the second session of our Python training. We will learn about the data analysis tools. We will learn about the NumPy and Pandas libraries and their different uses. Today's session will be delivered by Mr. Divyanshu Vyas. Mr. Divyanshu Vyas is a Master Petroleum Engineering student graduating this May 2021 from IIT ISM Dhanbad, currently working as a machine learning and data analytics consultant at Dialytics and the CEO of Petroleum from Scratch project with 1 year and a half of experience with oil and gas applications and problem solving using Python. Mr. Vyas worked on numerous full-scale to mini-scale projects ranging from core reservoir engineering concepts through drilling engineering concepts to oil production engineering and numerical simulations using Python and its packages. Mr. Vyas actively maintains a GitHub repository for oil and gas data analysis and machine learning, deep learning, to help and mentor the community with whatever he learns. So before we start, I would like to remind you to keep your microphones muted and to write your questions in the chat box. So Mr. Vyas, you can start.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so I'll just share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the second session, and it was a very fun first session that we did on the basics of Python. That is good enough to get you started on this journey, but not great enough to make you solve a lot of applications as you will yourself understand if you have practiced. A very common example that you must have for anyone who would have practiced is he would have tried to keep on all the data inside a list or and try to solve things out of that list. And for anyone who has done that, it must have been a problem. We'll get to that just in a while, but I will try to just put forward uh, just a slide in front of all the young petroleum engineers who are trying to get into this journey. I'll just take 1 minute and try to share it again so that I can share the screen. And then once I clear like the path that will always make you feel like you are in the game when you are doing a lot of Python, and because our heart is basically towards petroleum engineering, right? We love listening to porosity, permeability, things like that. We love listening to material balance and well test analysis, reservoir engineering. And when we tend to delve deeper into Python and too much coding and all, we tend to get out of place. Like we feel like we are not in the game anymore, and it's someone else's game now. So how to make yourself feel like you are still in the game and use your own concepts to your advantage of data analysis is something that I'll just share just a second. I'm sharing a slide that I created to explain this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll share it again. Yeah. So my screen's visible, I guess.
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah. So this is like more about my experience, how I kept myself motivated and how I kept myself in the game. And when I say in the game, what I mean is you make sure that you apply whatever you're learning. You make sure you rectify and you verify that it is applicable in your field. And as that happens, as you see that, okay, I learned linear regression in Python and I can use it to solve petroleum engineering problems. The day you do that, then you feel like, okay, what's next? What can I do next? So that is something that you can always keep on doing to enjoy this journey while you go on doing. Because for some people, Python might be boring as it gets about more and more coding. So it is. So what you have to do, you take any tool, be it Python, MATLAB, R, Excel, anything. You just take this tool and you learn about the tool. So suppose you have listened to the first lecture of this internship, right? And then you pick a topic of your choice. Let's say we do first three sessions. Okay, don't worry about petroleum engineering for at least the first 2-3 sessions of this internship. Okay, by the third session you will have learned a lot about Python. Then you go back to your textbooks that you love and the subject that you love. For example, if you love reservoir engineering, you can go back and pick up LP Dake, for example. You can pick up, if you are a fan of EOR, you can go and pick Larry Lake. And if you are into well test analysis, you can go and pick the great John Lee's book, right? And then once, because you have already read the problem statements in there, and you won't spend much time into understanding what's in there. You already know what to do with that. You are just waiting for a tool other than the Casio calculator that you normally use. You wanted some tool that you can showcase your skills with. Now you have it. So suppose you pick a problem statement from the text. Let's say I pick up from material balance chapter from LP Dake. There is a very nice problem that is solved using graphs, using the Havelanau, the straight line method of material balance. You go and pick that problem statement, read about it in the textbook. That way you are re-energizing yourself with petroleum engineering concepts. Then what you do, then you come back to the Python, revise Python concepts that you have learned in the first 3 sessions. Then you implement it with Python using the tools that you have learned. I did exactly that. This is one of the first projects that gave me confidence. I did this at least like one year back, more than 1 year back. I did this exact problem from LP Dake, and it gave me a lot of confidence. And I'm sure you will feel confident as well. As you like verify your results from the textbook with Python plots and Python code, you will grow in confidence and you will make Python your right hand tool slowly and slowly. You'll feel like everything that you find out, every data table that you see, you will be like, okay, let me do this in Python. Now you go back to learning mode, you expand your understanding of Python. Now you become a data analyst. Once you become a data analyst, you go back to textbooks, you solve problems. Again, you go back to the learning mode, you understand machine learning now, and you go back and look at papers and research papers and get data sets. And then you go back and apply these concepts to these data sets. Try to do machine learning problems. And once you have completed this journey, you're already doing great than you were 1 month back. So this is how like you can become a great data analyst as a petroleum engineer really quick. Okay, because this will act like a catalyst. And let's go back after this philosophy. Let's go back to uh, understanding things, right? Okay, so let's go back to today's session agenda with that confidence in in our heads. So in order to be able to apply everything in Python, you have to, very important, you have to spend at least 1 week on NumPy and Pandas. NumPy is like the calculator of Python. It is like the catalyst of Python. It makes things very fast. It is so you must have seen that Python is very user friendly. You can read the code and it is like human language. But for anyone who has done C++, it is not too much user friendly, but it is very fast. C++ is a low level and it's very fast language. And for Python, it's a bit slow than C++. But a great smart thing that Python developers did, what they did was they created this library called NumPy. And on top of NumPy, they use NumPy to create other things such as pandas and all the other objects. Why this is hugely beneficial is because speed matters a lot. So the day you solve, let's say 70,000 or millions of data points you have and you want to solve problems, using that data, you will worry about speed. And NumPy helps you in just that. It is built on top of C++, and it is a great at speed. It speeds up your code really well. You can try this. There are numerous tutorials on this. You can check the time that it takes to compute things on a list and the time that it takes to compute things on a NumPy array. Okay, with the same amount of data, and you will be surprised by how much difference does it make. So NumPy is a linear algebra library. It helps you create vectors. It helps you create matrices. It helps you create 2D, 3D, any dimension of vectors, right? And the reason it is so important for data science with Python is that almost all of the libraries in the Python data ecosystem, they rely on NumPy as one of their main building blocks. Everything is basically made on top of NumPy. The pandas library that you will just see in this lecture today, it is also made upon NumPy. Okay, so it is very important to understand NumPy. Your coding skills will greatly improve. So first thing to practice NumPy, if you are doing this live currently right now, I will try to go slow so that you can practice live also with me. So the first thing that you want to do is import NumPy as NP. So if you are doing it in Google Colab, you don't have to do any pre-installation or anything. But if you are doing in your Jupyter notebook, what you will have to do is you will have to go to your command prompt, or you have to go to your Anaconda prompt, and you have to install it, and you have to run the Anaconda prompt. If you have installed Anaconda Jupyter, right, you have to run it in administrator mode, and you have to do this command. Okay, but if you are using Anaconda, it means that you have already installed a package. But for those who still having difficulties in importing NumPy, you have to do this thing, not actually, pip install NumPy, okay, inside the command prompt. So for those who are not able to import, that means your NumPy library is not installed on your computer. You have to install it first. But that is not the agenda for today. So supposing you are running it in Colab, you just do this. Import NumPy as NP. Now what this statement means is NumPy is a group of powers. Okay, it's a huge package. Okay, now you want to call NumPy into your code. Yes, like NP is more like the variable name, or the substitute name for NumPy. It's nothing else. You can go with just this much, import NumPy. You can go with import NumPy as NP. You can go with import NumPy as N. It's on you. But is using the superpowers of NumPy, right?
Sir, sorry, can you repeat the last information?
Yes. Can you repeat?
The last information, because
You lost.
yes, I
You
lost.
lost my connection.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I'll repeat. Just give me a second. Yeah. So NumPy. So you see this statement, right? Import NumPy as NP. So what this statement means in short is you are importing a library called NumPy. When I say library, it is a package of commands. It has a lot of commands in it. It has a lot of powers in it. So you have to call all those powers into this current black screen that you're seeing, right? This code notebook, we call it. So that the computer, this notebook knows that, okay, we need NumPy in this code. So we have to import NumPy first before using it. So to import it, we import it with a substitute name called NP, right? So we import NumPy as NP, we do shift plus enter. Okay. Next up, what we do is we understand why do we need NumPy first before moving on. Okay. So suppose in the last lecture, we read about lists. So suppose we have stored porosities in a list. Okay. Now suppose my code requires me to square the porosity. Now what this command we are trying to do in this command is we want to square every term, or we want to raise every term to a single power. So we want to do something like a term by term manipulation. So if I try to do this using a list, because porosity phi right now is a list, it gives an error, because lists are not made for mathematics. Lists are not made for computation. So that's why you need NumPy. So in order to do the same for someone who is still interested, okay, I still want to do it in list, no matter what. So you have to do something like this for p in phi. So this will also give you a revision of for loops. So for every porosity p in the list phi, you can, what you can do is p equals to p square, something like that. Okay, so that will square every term up. And if you go back and you check whatever is there in phi, you can see now, just a second. Okay, okay, so something is missing over here. Okay, yeah. So you have to run a for loop over every term in this porosity list, and then square, iterate over every term in this porosity list, and then square it and reassign it back to, back to its original list. So what, suppose I am, so let's do it. So this is how you pick up the indices of the porosity list. Okay, range, len, phi. So what this is trying to do is, this is trying to give me the number of iterations that I want to do. Okay, so the length of this porosity list is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 elements. So it will run the iterations 5 times, and then for every position, what I have to do is I have to square it. So phi at I is equals to phi, which was initially at I. You have to just square it and replace it with the initial value, and then you just run this for loop, and then that updates your porosity list to the square of its own values. So you see, we have already, we have to do a lot of things in order to run this code. Somehow I'm missing out on something which I'm not able to find out. Length file, let me just provide it explicitly. Oh shit. I missed the term in. Okay, so you can see now, this is how long you have to go in order to do this. But cutting it short, today's agenda is looking at NumPy. If you convert this typecast, this list into a NumPy array, you don't have to do this anymore. So that's exactly what I have done. Phi array is np.array phi, and you just square it, phi array whole square, and you can see in one line I have done everything. So it can be anything. It can be 2 point, it can be 0. If you want to do a square root, you just have to provide, rather than doing a for loop, you are just providing one line of command. Now that is one advantage. The other advantage, of course, it's the speed that it takes. As a NumPy array, it takes a lot of time. Even if some computations are possible using lists, you'll observe that it takes a lot of time using lists. But in NumPy array, it is short, sweet, and fast, right? The second thing is coming to the matrices. Now this is called a one-dimensional array or a one-dimensional vector. For people of physics and mathematics, it's a very important application. The second dimension is, it makes it a matrix, right? So that's why we call it a linear algebra library, NumPy, because it has a lot to do with the matrices. Where matrices will help you in your understanding of data analysis and data science is, you will have to deal with, basically in future, if you want to go and solve neural networks, right? So neural networks and deep learning and artificial neural networks, they are totally based on linear algebra. A lot of importance is there. Like, you have to have a clear understanding of linear algebra in order to be a great deep learning practitioner. So in order to do that, of course, you have to have a great hand over NumPy. So you have to understand how we play around with matrices and how we do it. So that is your motivation to do, matrices. So again, a list of lists is a 2D matrix, and then currently it is in a form of a list of lists. When you typecast it, it becomes a matrix, right? You can see now it becomes a matrix. Now I can do the same thing, that for example, I want to square every element in the matrix, no matter, suppose it's a 100 by 100 matrix. What if I want to square it using for loops? It would take a lot of time. Every element in a 100 by 100, that means 100 into 100 number of iterations I have to run. So that already sounds like a great deal. But if you store that same array in a matrix of NumPy, you can see the same thing I can do using this code, A2 whole square. So A2 is a matrix that I've created, and suppose I want to square all the terms of A2, all I have to do is A2 whole square. Okay, so A2 was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A2 whole square is 149. As simple as that. So be it any length of array, it won't take any time. Like, it will happen within a fraction of seconds. Now we move on. with this clear like understanding of why do we need NumPy, creating space for it in our hearts, we move forward and we understand what we can do with it. Okay, so we can, for example, if you have seen a relative permeability curve, so you have seen that on the x-axis you have saturations, right? Water saturation. You have 0 to 1. Always you have 0 to 1 saturation. So this is something like a NumPy array that you want to create. Now, if you have to create it using list, the x-axis you have to create using list. You'll have to provide yourself data like 0, 0 0.05, 0 0.1, 0 0.15, and you can keep on adding more and more data towards one. But suppose you want to build an array of 100 values, and all you know about that is the starting point and the ending point. So your starting point is 0, your ending point is 1, and suppose you want to do a delta x of 0.005, so that makes a NumPy. So the way you do it is np.arrange. Now you see, this is where we need the term np. Suppose if you had just done import NumPy rather than import NumPy as np, then you would have to provide NumPy, the entire word NumPy over here. Suppose I do import NumPy as n, then I can just do it with, rather than using np, I just have to provide n over here. So that's just something. Now what arrange is like a array with a range. That's why the A. You would have seen the term range that I used in the last lecture. Similarly, if you want to create an array with a given range, that you can do with np.arrange. Okay, you just provide the starting point, you just provide the stopping point, and you provide the delta x. Okay, so you can see, I will just run it in front of you and you will find it yourself. So you can see 0, 0 0.05, 0 0.01, and you can see the delta x is constant. Okay, so that is the main importance of np.arrange. It creates a vector with a common delta x. When I say delta x, x2 minus x1, every subsequent value will have the same difference between these two, right? So this is very important. This makes a x-axis for a relative permeability curve, right? Moving on, what about we want to generate a matrix or a placeholder sort of thing? Suppose we want to just create a matrix of 100 by 100 for now, and in the future I will need to store the data in this 100 by 100 matrix. I have done this practically. It's very important when you do reservoir simulation problems in Python, trying to do finite difference codes, because you will have, let's say, 100 by 100 grid blocks in a reservoir simulation. So in order to store all the data, let's say pressure for every grid block, permeability, if it's a heterogeneous reservoir, you want to store permeability for every grid block, you want to store whatever information, saturation for every grid block. So first you have to create a placeholder for all the grids, right? So this is more like you are creating a set of grid blocks and storing, for now you are storing zeros in it. So you can see I have created np.zeros, 5 comma 5 is the shape. Suppose I want to do 10 comma 10, I can just provide 10 comma 10, and it works for rectangular matrices as well. You don't have to just keep on going with square matrices. So you can see now I can store the pressure values for each grid, initialize it with the pressure values of each grid, and then I can do the finite difference code on this and see how pressure varies for every grid block over time. So that is more like if you're interested, you can connect and we can discuss how we do it in Python. But that is something like a more practical application of why do we need a quick way to create a matrix in Python, right? Similarly, if you're not interested in zero, suppose we want to multiply every term with another value, just it becomes a constant matrix. Then zeros won't help. Then we need ones, right? Suppose I want to create a simulation model of a reservoir, and I have to then initialize it with the initial pressure of the reservoir, because suppose my reservoir is 5,000 psi at the initial point. Then how can I create a matrix with each grid block having 5,000 value? This is how I can do it. Suppose my reservoir is, let's say, 10 by 10 grid blocks. Okay, so first I create np.ones. Okay, now everything is so I'll call it the pressure matrix, pressure matrix. Then let's say my initial pressure is 5,000 psi, 5,000 psi. Then all I have to do is pi multiplied by or let's say p multiplied by pi. It's one and the same thing. Just what is this? Yeah, pi. So what's happening? That's it. Now if I see the stature of my P, it becomes something like this, which is basically nothing but every grid block having the initial reservoir pressure. Now I can apply the finite difference reservoir simulation, and I can vary my, like I can try to see how the pressure varies in each and every grid block. Okay, so this is too far-fetched, but it is good enough to understand why do we need it in first place. Moving forward, suppose now we have understood what np.arrange. Now we have looked at how we can create stopping point, and I want to make a customized array, and I want to customize it with the number of data points that I want to create, right? Suppose I want to create a x-axis of saturation, and I want 100 data points on x-axis. So this is something that we can do using this. So you can see np.linspace start stop num equals to 50. So what that is, np.linspace is creates a linearly spaced array. It starts at 0, it stops at 10, and number of data points. So basically, you must have already understood that it will use the initial and the final and divide it with 50 in order to find the delta x that we had to provide explicitly in np.arrange. Now it does it by automatically himself, like you can see. Suppose I do it with 0 to 1 and I want 50 or let's say 100 saturation points. So you can see this makes my x-axis for saturation of water, right? So moving on. Oh, now what if we want to create, I have never used this basically, but what if we want to create a identity matrix in Python? So this is how you do. It's called I, more like I, right? I for E by E. So because an identity matrix is always a square matrix, you don't have to provide two parameters for the shape, you just have to provide one parameter, right? So if I want to provide a 5x5 identity matrix, all I have to do is provide the 5, right? Now moving on, this is very important. NumPy is random number generation capabilities. In a lot of machine learning tasks, what you'll have to do is you'll have to generate data for yourself. For example, suppose um, you know the range of two things, like you know the range of porosities and you know the range of permeabilities, and there is a section of data which is empty in your table, and you want to fill the data in that section using random numbers but within a given range. Suppose it's 5 data points, then you can yourself do it manually. Suppose it is 5,000 data points that you want to fill it, and the entire data set length is 1 lakh. Now, removing those 5,000 rows just because two columns did not have data would be a foolish thing to do. So what you do is you do random number generation and you fill in the data points using those random numbers. So that's the practical application of why you might need random numbers in the future. You might want to do statistics in Python. You want to do plots of normal distribution, Poisson's distribution, standard normal distribution. You want to see what standard deviation means. You want to see what a median means. You want to see what a percentile means. Everything can be taken care of if you understand how to generate random numbers, right, in Python. So suppose I want to generate, so in order to do anything related to random numbers, you have to provide this np.random first, and then you provide all the steps after this, right? Suppose I want to generate 3 random numbers using a uniform distribution. What a uniform distribution in 0 to 1 looks like, it is nothing but a horizontal line, or almost like a distribution which has values around, uh, like 1 upon b minus a, right? You can just go and look at what uniform distribution means, right? You can see this is the uniform distributions for 2 points between b and a, right? So all you have to do, so this is just one example of generating. By default, it takes into consideration the uniform distribution. So this is the way to generate random numbers that follow a the user wants me to generate normal distributions, so standard normal distributions. This is how you go and do it.
Sir, you got disconnected again. Can you repeat the last sentence?
Uh, Did I get disconnected over here?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so np.random.rand generates, and this 3 means the number of points that you want to generate or the samples that you want to generate. So you can think of it like this. The computer already has millions of data points in its store, and you just want to sample out any number of values from that basket. Okay. Now, when I say basket, the computer can have different baskets for different distributions. One basket can be from normal distribution. One basket can be about uniform distribution. One basket can be, so when I say for now, for starters, you can treat distribution just like a different, you know, a set of numbers having a particular quality. They are following a particular function, right? If you understand, for example, Gaussian distribution follows more like e to the power minus x square, and uniform distribution follows a different equation. And every sort of distribution has its own characteristic equation. So the numbers that are generated using that characteristic equation, they are stored in a particular basket. So a uniform distribution basket will have the numbers generated from a different equation. A Gaussian distribution basket will have numbers generated from a different distribution. Now, as I provide my command, so suppose I have provided np.random.rand. So this is telling the computer, okay, look at the uniform distribution basket and pick out 3 numbers from that. And this is the output. Every time you run it, suppose I run it again, it generates different numbers. You can see now it's different numbers. But the common thing being, every time I run it, the numbers will be different, but they will belong to the same basket as long as the command is same. Just try to memorize this 0.004055. Now, if I run it again, you can see again number is changed. So this is the advantage of uh, random number generation. It gives you a different unbiased approach every time you run the code. If you want to make it constant so that every time you run the code it gives you the same random number, you can provide a seed. You can go and look up to what a seed means in the random number generation. So this was about uniform distribution. Similarly, you can generate 5 samples from a standard normal distribution. And you can, suppose if you want to, this is about generating a vector. Suppose if you want to generate a matrix of standard normal distribution, this is again a matrix. So you can play around, you can generate, let's say I want to generate a huge data. This is called a synthetic data set. Suppose I want to 7,000 by 7,000, 7,000 by 5. Okay, now you can see, bam, it did not take like even a second. So np, so 7,000, it already makes a typical synthetic machine learning data case for you, right? So if you know what your data looks like, you can create your synthetic data and play around with machine learning algorithms on your own data, right? And this is how you generate it. I have done it a lot, playing around with linear regression. You first generate random data of x, random data of y, and then you fit a linear regression model in that, and you test a machine learning algorithm of linear regression, and then you play around with it. Who cares about the data sets? Who cares about everything when you can generate the data on your own, right? This is just for understanding purposes. Suppose I want to generate random integers now. So this is the command that does it. So again, to make it simple, it is nothing but a different bucket which just has, you know, integers in it. And this command is telling the computer, okay, take that bucket and take this range. Low is 1, high is 100. So take this limit and find out 10 integers from 1 to 100 for me. Now you can see 33, 29. If I run it again, it will give me different integers, right? So this can be how you generate random integers. Now, how to see what your shape is. Suppose you have imported a data set. I will tell you how to do that just in a few minutes. Suppose if you have imported a data set from somewhere and you want to, you want to find out the shape of the data set, because it's so huge that you cannot just, because small data sets are fine, but suppose I have millions of data points, then I need to know the shape of data points. If you go down the lane and practice machine learning, you will understand it has, it has golden importance. It is very important to understand the shapes of matrices. If you want to understand the mathematics behind, let's say, artificial neural networks, if you cannot understand the shapes of matrices, it will be very difficult to see what's going on. And you will understand. Don't worry about right now, but when you go to the, let's say, 2 months down the lane and you are trying to understand artificial neural networks and the math behind it, you will see why I was talking about the shapes and other things of the array, right? Suppose I have created np.linspace. Now what this means is, again, to revise, np.linspace 0 100, what it means is start from 0, end at 1, and give me 100 data points. Okay, so we already know that it has 100 data points. So you can see if I provide v dot shape. Now, if I had provided this parenthesis, it would have made it a something which looks like this is called a method. But something which does not end with parenthesis, it's called an attribute. Okay, so shape is the attribute of a numpy array, and if it was like this, suppose max is a method of a numpy array, min is a method of a numpy array, but shape is an attribute. It does not have to have parentheses. That's an error, right? So you can see, because it's a 1D vector, you can see there is no second dimension over here. But we can reshape it. Suppose we have 100 data points. So a collection of numbers of 100 data points can be reshaped into, let's say, 10 by 10, right? We can reshape it into 10 by 10. So we are reshaping this V100 into a 10 by 10 matrix. So V100 means a 100 length vector, and M1010 means a 10 by 10 matrix having the same number of elements, just stored differently. Okay, so if I run it, so V100 looks like this. You can see only one square bracket is there, which tells us that it's a 1D vector. But I take the same data, okay? I take the same data and I reshape it into a different shape. It is obvious that you cannot provide other shapes to this because it has to resemble with, it has to be consistent with the number of data points. We have 100 data points, so 10 by 10 is fine. If we had, let's say, 90 data points, then 10,9 would have been fine, right? So we reshape it and we do M10, M1010. This is a variable name. So you can see now it has two square brackets. And if I do the shape of this, you can see 10, 10, right? So this is the how you find out the shape. Suppose I want to find out the length of this vector. How you do the length is how a machine finds out the length of a matrix is it looks at which dimension has the most number of data points. Suppose it is a vertical data set. It has a lot of rows, let's say 1 lakh rows and 5 columns. Then the length of the data set will be 1 lakh. Suppose it has 1 lakh columns and 5 rows, then the length of the data set will be different, right? So this is how you find out the length. Now there'll be a lot of cases where you want to find out the maximum value in an array, the minimum value in an array, the index position of the maximum value in the array, and the index position of the minimum value in the array, right? You can use this notebook as the reference later on when you solve various machine learning problems, and you can use it. No one remembers code in machine learning. Just tell yourself that. It's not about remembering, it's about understanding why you need it and knowing that there is something like that that you can do. Suppose you take away that argmax and argmin are there to help you in the future. You don't have to remember the code at all. Okay, you just have to remember what they do. So suppose I create a random array of integers, okay, of having 15 values. So I have this random array. Now I want to find out the minimum value in this array. So you can see 2 is the minimum value. When I ran it initially, it had 8. Again, random number generation. Now you see initially when I ran it, it had 48 as the maximum value. When I run it again, it has 46 because I ran it again. So I have found out just a quick code and I find out, suppose if there were millions of data points, again, quick code and you find out the min and the max. Now, what if I want to find out where this 2 and 46 are located? Very important. So all you have to replace this min with is you replace it with argmin. Okay, you replace it with argmin and you provide this array inside it, and 4 is now the index position where your 2 is located. Now if I just index the array, remember indexing from last lecture, indexing for lists is very similar to indexing for arrays. So I have found out the position for minimum value in this array. I provide this position in a square bracket, which is the indexing. And you can see when I run it, okay, the index is now different. This is from old. So index is now 2. Just a second. Just a second. Hello. Yeah. Sorry. So you have found out the minimum value in this array, and you have found out where this minimum value is located. Just to verify if this index position returns the same minimum value, you can just provide this index position, which is now 2. It was initially 4, and you can see. Uh, oh, it is okay. Something's wrong over here. Suppose this is my array now, and I do the np.argmin for this array. Okay, and I take this index and I provide this index inside my, I provide this index into my ranar. And I can check this up with this thing, right? I can check this up. And you can see that this thing gives me the minimum value again. So this is how you can play around with the min max and the locations of min and locations of max, right? And you can keep going on with these values. Okay, moving on, indexing, selection, and broadcasting, they are very important in NumPy arrays. So indexing is, again, it's very similar to the indexing of lists that you have learned in the last lecture. We don't have to go around it again. You can just go around the code that you can see. This is how you index the 7th position or the 7th index of this array. This is how you index a range from 0th position to the 7th position in the array. And this is how, suppose, now this is a very important point that I would like to share with you. The slice of an array is the view of that array itself. I'll repeat that. The slice of the array is the view of that array itself. It's not a separate copy of that array. When I'm slicing this, I'm taking the same array and bringing it in front of you, but just a portion of it. Why this is important is, while doing codes about NumPy arrays, if you initialize, if you provide, let's say if I take, let's say I do code like this, I take the 0 to 3rd position of the array and I store the value 1000 into that. This 1000 will be reflected in the actual array. It will not just be reflected in this slice. It is not a copy. It's the reflection of the actual array. So when I run the actual array ARR, you can see the first 3 elements are 1000. And this can create a lot of problems in your code if you don't know this, because you are thinking that, okay, I'm just playing around with a different, just a section of this array, and it won't cause much. But in your mind, you are thinking that my actual data is preserved, which is not the case. Your actual data is not preserved. If you are playing with the slice, the actual data is not preserved. So in order to solve that problem, what you can do is you can first create a copy of that array and then slice it up and play around with it. Okay, so this is a very important point to always remember while you are doing data analysis projects, in order to actually preserve the actual data set that you have. Otherwise you will end up modifying it and the data will lose its position and it will cause a lot of problems in the future. So that's one thing. And this is called broadcasting. This is called broadcasting. You can see just one line of code and I can initialize, let's say 1000 slices, 1000. Suppose I have million, I have a vector of million length. I pick 1000 data points from the center of that array and I can initialize them with 0 in just one line of code. With list, I would have to run a for loop again. I'm tired of saying, but arrays are the future. List, you can just forget it. Okay, so let's moving on. This is the 2D array, already talked about. So indexing a 2D array, yes, very important. How you index a 2D array? Look at this thing. In order to index a 2D array, you provide the row min to row max and call min to call max. Okay, row min to row max, for example, this is my array. 0 row, so the first row is the 0th row, the second row is the first row, and the third row is the second row. I hope you know what that means. I'm talking in the indexes. So 0th index, first index, second index. Again, 5, 20, 35 are the 0th index columns. 10, 20, 40, 25, 40, they are the first index columns. And 15, 30, 45, they are the second index columns, right? So you have to provide the indices. Suppose I want to find slice out the first two rows in my array, right? So I have to provide the row min, 2 row max plus 1. Actually, suppose I want to find out up to the, I want to print the selected section of this array. Okay, what I have to provide is 0 to 2. So that 2 will not be included. It will just take the 0th row and the first row and ignore the second row. Okay, so you always, the right extreme always has to have one more than what's required, because the right extreme is the one which is not included. And call min to call max, suppose I want to, if I just don't want, I want all the columns rather than just a section of columns, I can just provide, rather than call min to call max, I can just provide this thing. What this thing means is, take all the columns that are there. The same applies for rows. Take all the rows that are there and provide call min to call max. Okay, so this is just an example. You can see 0 to 2. So this takes in 0th row, first row, and this takes in all the columns starting from the first column. So you can see 10, 15, 25, 30. 10, 15, 25, 30. So this is how you play around. It will need practice, but you will get very perfect at how you slice and play around with this. Now, this is a very nice example on something very powerful you can do. This is more like filtering data based on a particular condition. Suppose I have stored the marks of all the students in a particular class. Suppose the class has 1,000 students and the marks are between 1 to 100. And I've stored them in a NumPy array called marks. Okay. And I can see the marks like this, where index position means the roll number of a student. You can see the first student just got 36 marks, and more like this student did really well. He got 90 marks. Then the faculty supervisor tells that 75 marks is the cutoff to get into the next class, and you want to filter out what were the people who scored, how many number of people scored more than 75. You can do that using this code. So this is a lot of data points. All you have to do is do this. So take out all the marks given that marks is greater than 75. This is as simple as that. This is called masking. So what that does is, if I just do marks is greater than 75, which is more like the index of this thing, marks greater than 75, it will return a Boolean array. You can see true, false, true, false. Wherever the value follows this condition, the truth value will be true. Wherever the Boolean fails this condition, it will be false. And once I take this as my index, it only prints those positions of data where the truth value was true and not false, right? So you can see 84 and all the data points. And if I find out the shape of this array, I can see that 239 students out of 1,000 qualified for my next round. So this is very important in data. This is exactly what data analysis is: filtering data and just one line of code. Okay, moving ahead. I have already clarified this. NumPy basically does everything on term by term basis. If you want to do sine theta, cos theta, you can do it all. I provided a link to just look at what NumPy can do. And basically that is the most important task. This was just a teaser. Now we move on to the giant, which is called Pandas, the MS Excel of Python. Okay. So it's a short thing because we have spent a lot of time on NumPy. That understanding is helping us a great deal already in understanding pandas. Again, in order to import pandas, you have to import pandas as PD. Okay, you have to import it. You can import it with import pandas simply, but again, why write pandas everywhere? Okay, so the pandas library has two products basically. The first product is series, and the second product is the data frame. Okay, and if I write the sequence of the sequence in terms of the maturity or the how the more advanced, the higher, the better. So the simplest is NumPy array, but the NumPy array lacks in the fact that it does not have the names. Suppose I want to name every position. I want to name not by just index 0, 1, 2, 3, but I want to suppose in the college, every student has a roll number. What if I want to provide the roll number as the index, explicitly provided? So that is not possible in NumPy. So if we could name every element of NumPy array, that would make a series. Now, if we have multiple series and we could store all these series in a like Excel sheet or something, but in Python, that is called a data frame. So you see, the simplest product is NumPy. The more advanced one is series, and the best one is data frame. Okay, a combination of NumPy makes a series. A combination of multiple series makes a data frame. So that is just to remember things. Okay, so you import pandas as PD. These are the values that you want to store, and these are the labels that you want to store these values with. And I store them. This is how you do. So you provide the values and the labels. Suppose these are the names of the people, and these are the let's say the number of cars that they have, and you want to store this data in a singular series or something like that. Series is more like an Excel sheet having just one column. Okay, so this is the name of people, and this is the number of cars they have, and you store them in the series by this command pd.series, and you can see this is the data. 1 2 3 4 5 is the data, and abcde is the label for that data. Okay, so there are two things, label and index. So label is more like the what you see right now, but in the background what's going on, it still has an index like a NumPy array. So a series is a NumPy, it possesses the powers of a NumPy array, just that it has the additional power that you can also have labels. 1 2 3 4 5 have their indexes like a NumPy array would. One is at the 0th index, two is at the second like the first index. But the additional power that this object now has, because it's a series, is that it has labels as well. Okay, and suppose you want to call the first, like you want to find out how many cars that the person named A has, all you have to run is this command. You can see we can now index a series using a label. Till now we were doing it with just the index, but now we can do it with a label. Okay, so this is all about series. You will rarely use series in your data analysis projects, but then we get to the main task, which is data frames. Suppose I have this data from the last lecture. Suppose I have the rock data. I have the porosity, I've stored it in a dictionary. So I have a list of data. Now that I know NumPy arrays, I can also use a NumPy array rather than a list. But you can see I have stored 5 as the porosity. 0.05 is the porosity of my first rock sample, and just goes on, blah, blah, blah. And you can see the lithology is corresponding to this. So 5% porosity, maybe it's a carbonate, 25% porosity, it's a sandstone, 0.08, it's carbonate. So you can see I can just take this dictionary, I can provide this command, and this now becomes my data frame. Okay, so this is exactly what a data frame is. When I said it's the MS Excel of Python, I meant it because it starts with a tabular format, and then you can play around with things that you do in Excel, you can also do with uh, this. And because it's built on top of NumPy, it will be quick, very quick, right? So suppose I want to just print this column, the lithology column, I can do it with this command. Suppose I want to do just run this porosity column, this phi column, I can just provide it like this. This is how you pick out columns from a data frame. Okay. Now, suppose we have, so this is creating a data frame from a dictionary. This is the first topic. This is creating a data frame from a dictionary. Data frame from a dictionary. Okay, you can create a data frame from a dictionary, you can create a data frame from a series, you can create a data frame from a NumPy array, and that's exactly what we are looking at. Suppose this is the data that we need. So what that does, right now we discussed 10 minutes back that we have a standard normal distribution, and we can just generate 5,4, which means that 5 rows and 4 columns of data, and this is the data. Okay, this is the data attribute of the data frame. So this is the data that will go on in this data frame. Now, other than data, what we need, two more things we need. We need the index labels and we need the column headers, right? So this is the index, okay? You can see A, B, C, D, E, because we have 5 rows, right? So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indices. And because we have 4 columns, we need W, X, Y, Z, okay? And this is nothing but a way to split a string based on the space command, right? It's more by practice, but you can look up. I'm putting in various advanced examples in front of you just so that you run it 2-3 times and you know it as well. So you can see I have taken random numbers and I've created a data set of my own. Okay. Now I can pick any column and I can play around with it. I can, let's say I want to pick up W column and I can play around with it. Now, suppose I want to create a new column. In data analysis terms, this is called feature engineering. Every column is a feature in data science. Suppose I want to create a square kind of thing of originally existing column, and I want to further discard the originally existing column. So I can create this new column called W squared using this command. This is how simple it is. Be it 1,000 rows, be it 10,000 rows, be it 50,000 rows, this is the command that applies to all. Okay. So what this command is doing is take the W column. So the column will be taken in, this W column will be taken in, all the values will be squared and will be stored in a new column whose name is W squared. Okay. Suppose now I want to take two columns, say X and Y, and sum them up and store them in a new column called sum. That is also I can do. So this new column is the sum of X and Y. So you can see my new column is again having X and Y. Now, suppose I want to plot all these points. So just by one line, plotting is not the agenda for today. It is the agenda for next session. But this pandas library also allows you to plot. You can see how these, suppose the indexes were not A, B, C, D, but they were more like time or the date. Okay. It would have been a time series data. Then this plot would have made more sense. You could have seen how oil rates are varying as a function of time. A, B, C, D, E would be replaced by dates rather, and you could have seen how oil rates are declining as a function of time by just this data, right? This df.plot. Okay, so this is how you create a data frame using a NumPy array. Lock and ilock, just 2-3 topics left for today. So lock is how, you have seen indexing and slicing for NumPy arrays and all. But now in a data frame, we have two more properties. We have index columns, index names, and we have column names. What if we want to access the data of the data frame using these two attributes? So that's why lock and ilock are there. Suppose I want to pick up the B row and the C row and the X column and the Y column. So I can do it using this. Okay, df.lock, because now I am playing with names, labels. I have to go with what starts with L, which is lock. If in case I wanted to do it with indices, I would go with ilock. They do the same thing. I repeat, they do the same thing, but it all depends on how you want to play the game. Currently, I'm playing the game with labels. That's why I'm using lock. If I wanted to play the game with indices, I would go with ilock, right? So you'll see what that means. So I want to start with the Ath row, and I want to end at the Bth row. I want to start at the Xth column, and I want to stop at the Yth column. Just that the difference being, like you would have seen in slicing, this thing, whatever was on the right was not included, but in lock, it will be included. In ilock, again, it won't be included. So df.lock. That's exactly what it is doing. It is picking two columns and two rows, right? Again, the concept of the slice being a view of the actual data applies here as well. So if you want to play around with it, create a copy first and then play around with it. Otherwise, it will modify and hijack the entire data set, and you will be lost and you will never know what happened. Okay, so make sure you create a copy first. Suppose I want to do the same thing using ilock. Let's see what we can do with that. Suppose this is my data frame and I want to print the first two rows and these two columns using ilock. Now I can do it using ilock like this. I want to start with the 0th index of the row and I want to end at the 0th index and the first index. So I will go to 2 because 2 will not be included. Similarly, I want to start at the first index for the column and end at the second index because second won't be included. So 0 to 2. And you can see again the same data. So that's exactly the difference between lock and ilock, but the purpose is same. It just depends on how you want to play the game. Okay, this is exactly what I've shown with two more examples. The final topic is how do you import data using pandas, which is the most practical task that you will do in every data science project. First thing is to import the data into your Jupyter notebook, and this is how you do it. If your data is stored like a comma separated value file, what is a comma separated value? If you see an Excel sheet, you replace every vertical line with a comma, it becomes a CSV file. That's how I remember. So if you replace the commas with vertical lines, that becomes an Excel sheet. Okay, it's more like they are brothers, CSV files and Excel. So if you are reading from an Excel format, you can see you have to provide this thing. If you are reading from CSV, you are used. So this data I'm importing. So if you open Colab, you will find out that it already has sample data that you can play with while you are learning this. So all you have to do is you go to the sample data, you open this folder, and you can copy this California housing train. You can copy the path for this and paste it inside the quote marks, and then you can run df.head. What df.head does is it prints the number of, just a quick look of the data set. Suppose I want to just look at the first two rows, I can do it using this. Suppose I want to look at the last two rows, then I can provide df.tail or data.tail, because so this is, you can see 17,000 data points are there. So that ends the story for today. And just two more things. If you want to look at the mean and the every statistical attributes of every column, you can do it using data.describe. You can see as soon as I do that, every column, every feature rather, you can see it is a data set which has the details of all the houses in California, and you know, the pricing and all that. So it's a regression task which will help us find out the price of a house looking at all the properties. You can see the total number of rooms, total number of bedrooms, the age of the house, the location of the house using latitude, longitude, and the user can, after the model is created, the user can input the attributes of the house, and the model will provide the typical price that you can expect of that house. So that's what the data set is meant for. df.describe, what that does is it helps us look at properties such as count, the mean, the standard deviation, the minimum, the 25th percentile, 50 percentile, all that for every column. So you can see if we look at total number of rooms in California, the mean number of okay, so this is something else. Okay, so the minimum number of rooms is 2, something like that. Okay, this is not an interpretative thing. Let's say population. So suppose we have a city based on this latitude and longitude, or a locality based on this latitude and longitude. The average population of this locality is this much, and these are all the other properties of that thing, right? So this is called descriptive statistics, and this is something that we'll look at when we solve a machine learning example. But I think that's too much for today, and I'll stop here and look at doubts if there are.
Okay, thank you, sir, for this really instructive session. So for questions, we have I think only one. It's from Mr. Shahar asking if you can tell some examples of attributes and methods. I think in working with the NumPy library.
In NumPy library, right? Attributes and methods. So I'm not a big fan of like showcasing things that we can remember, but if you are using, let's say you are using Jupyter Notebook, so in order to find out the anything, let's say methods, if you want to find out what methods are applicable for a particular data type, suppose I have created a NumPy array A, okay, all I have to do is press this dot and then press the tab, okay. So you can see in Colab, we don't need to press anything. It automatically gives us all the suggestions. But in Jupyter Notebook, as soon as you press the tab key, you will find out all the list of possible methods or attributes that you can, apply to that particular data type. For list, you will see that list also has methods. List data type will have different methods. NumPy array will have different methods. Data frame will have different methods, and so on. Yeah. So it's not important to remember, but you can look at it case by case.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. It's about the applications of these data analysis tools and machine learning in geosciences.
In geosciences, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So basically, if I want to answer that question, the question would boil down to the data sets that are available first, because every problem statement would have to start with the available data set that you would want to practice it. If you are already in the industry, then you have to look at the data that you have in your hands, and you can define the problem statement. But cutting it short, the open source data that I found relevant was the lithology prediction data set. Okay, so I will try to cover that if I get a hold of that data set. So what we can do using the same techniques that we saw today, we can build a machine learning model that can take in data about a particular rock sample. Let's say you take porosity, you take the mineralogy, you take on all these things, and the model will be able to tell the what's the lithology of that. I'm more into reservoir engineering, so I can talk about the applications from reservoir and petroleum perspectives. For example, suppose, okay, let's take a example. Suppose everyone knows about NMR logs, right? So NMR logs are very costly, and it's very difficult to run them, and it's not too practical for a lot of cases to run an NMR log. Now, suppose we have a data from a field where NMR log was run along with other logs. Okay. Now what we can do is we can run, let's say, a deep learning model or an artificial neural network, or let's say even a regression model, and we find out the relationship between other logs, let's say all the other logs that were run, and the NMR logs. So the model has now learned how we can get close to what the NMR log would suggest using the other logs. I'm trying to talk in a very simple language. So now that is a model which is capable enough of providing you what the NMR log would have done without running the NMR log. And as you get more and more data from different fields, and you keep like maturing your model with those data sets, you will build a very robust machine learning model which can provide you NMR log values, or even close to NMR log values, without having to run an NMR log values. And fields which are running, like small fields which are doing, they would have, even if something like an idea of immobile saturations or something is provided by a machine learning algorithm without having and to run NMR, saving millions of dollars, that would help a great deal. So a lot of practical applications are there. So one, you can go to OnePetro and look at it, and you can find a lot. Do you have questions?
Sorry, thank you. I think we have we can take one last question. It's about the conditional selection of columns. How can we select two columns, for example, population and households, according to some conditions? For example, if the housing median age is greater than 20.
Okay, so I think it's a long question. Is it there in the chat?
Yes, it's in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah. In pandas, how can we get two columns, for example, population and households, if we have a condition, for example, if the condition is housing median age?
Yes, it's this one.
Is 20. Yeah. Yeah. So if I want to be consistent with today's lecture, suppose we are talking about, let's say, this column, housing median age, right? Housing median age. I have found out that the median, which is the 50th percentile in housing median age, is 29.00. Okay, I can take this. There is also a NumPy facility which gives me some NP dot percentile. You can see NP dot percentile. I can put in the, let's say, suppose I have a column from this data set. So the column is housing median age. So I take this column, data, housing median age, and I want to find out, because I want to find out, as per the question, I want to find out the median. So I provide the 50th percentile. You can see 29.0 is the 50th percentile for my housing median age. So I provide this, let's say HMD 50, HM housing median age 50. I provide this into a variable. Now what I can do, I can take this column again, data, housing median age, and mask it wherever HMA, this data is greater than 50. Okay, so if I just run first like this, HMA50, you'll observe that a Boolean series is coming up. And as you might remember from today's lecture, I can just mask it up, the entire data set. Bam. Now this data set has all the data given the condition that the median age of the house is greater than what this condition specifies. So I hope that gives an idea. You can expand this understanding to now, if I want to just print the housing median age column as only, I can do this, housing median age. And that's also the case, right? You can see all the data points that are listed now are following the particular condition. So that's exactly how we do it. So I have taken housing median age greater than 20. It's already greater than 20. So that part, I guess, it's not important. Yeah. So do we have?
Okay, I think we are at the end of our session. Thank you very much, sir, for this. It's really for this information that you shared with us today. And I enjoy that. I hope that you enjoyed assisting today with us. I would like to remind you to stay updated on our LinkedIn group and to do your quizzes on Canvas when they are available. And thank you.
Just one update. Like I did in the last lecture, I will share this notebook as well in the same GitHub repository. So I will share the link if you can share in the LinkedIn group or something. So we will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.